Hello, everyone. Welcome to one of the most looked after sessions that we've been preparing with the CRA Connect community. And you can see here in the panel that I have three other members from CRA Connect that I brought with me in this discussion. And I'm very, very excited for this conversation because we've been talking a lot in CRA Connect about how the CRA role has been changing over the last 2 to 5 years, I would say. We see a lot of change, we see a lot of innovation, we see a lot of progress due to technology and due to innovation and due to the industry itself moving forward and changing. So I wanted to bring this conversation also to you, the broader community on LinkedIn. And I wanted to bring with me from CRA Connect community two senior CRAs, and we also have a clinical project manager who formerly was a site management associate and is at a very, I would say, very relevant company in the discussion how technology is shifting and it's adjusting the CRA role. So I look forward to when Kitti will tell us about her role as well. But first of all, if you don't know me, which I hope that I'm meeting some new people here in the audience today, I'm Maria Milas, and I am the founder of CRA Connect, which is a hub for CRAs. We have an online community for clinical research associates, and we have resources, we have sessions, we have webinars, we have courses, all for CRAs that empower CRAs in their journey. And I also have here on the panel with me Charlotte. Charlotte, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Charlotte. I'm a senior CRA. I've been in the clinical trials industry for over 6 years now, and I'm currently working for a medical device company creating the devices for breast cancer.
That's amazing. Thank you for being here, Charlotte, and for joining us in this panel. Maria del Mar, would you want to tell us a bit about you?
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Maria del Mar, and I've been in the industry for 7 years now, I think. I started as a study coordinator, and then I moved to a field CRA role, and now I work as an in-house. I'm based in Spain, so I've experienced both sides, on-site and remote, and I'm very happy to be here.
And we're so glad to have you here on the panel. And that's, Maria del Mar, a great exposure to have when you've seen the two sides from site and also from what we call the industry. You have such a great perspective, and I'm very happy to have you and your input in this panel today. Kitti, welcome to our panel.
Hi everyone. I am very happy to be here. Yes, my name is Kitti, and I have been working in the industry almost 4.5 years. I was a site management associate, an observational CRA, and now working as an assistant clinical project manager at the vendor site. So I think these are very good perspectives we can discuss.
What a rich panel we have today. I'm really excited for our conversation. We want to have a short, around 30-minute discussion on exactly what we just said, how the CRA role has been changing, what's changed, and is there actually everything changing, or are there still skills, knowledge, competencies that are still needed and that are the same when it comes to the core CRA role? So that's what we'll be discussing today. But to give us all a little bit of context, the reason why we brought up this topic is because I'm sure that you are aware of a, let's say, trend or of an industry shift toward more DCT, so decentralized clinical trials. And what are DCT? I just wanted to, and I literally have just one slide, and I wanted to bring you the same context that we have as we prepared for this session. So what are DCTs? Decentralized clinical trials are those studies that are a little bit, let's say, different. They're not traditional approach because they can take some of the features or some of the assessments or some of the parts or the elements of a clinical trial and shift it to completely remote, completely away from the clinical site. And what do we mean by that? Maybe a patient can receive the IP, so the drug, the study drug, directly at home, coming from the vendor, coming from the storage facility. Or a study nurse can do the patient visit directly at home. Or maybe even the patient, instead of completing those paper questionnaires or those paper quality of life questionnaires, they can do it through an app. So these are studies in which maybe all of the assessments or maybe just some of the assessments, what we call hybrid, are done remotely. And that also includes the CRAs being able to do remote monitoring. And in order for a study to be a DCT, so a decentralized clinical trial, we have some elements, of course, that come into place. And these elements are usually technology, of course. That's what will allow us to take these elements, take these assessments, take these features from a clinical study into a remote setup. So what could be these elements? For example, we could have an electronic consent form where patients can consent that ICF from home. We can have an EPRO or an ECOA, which is a system where patients can report their symptoms or their drug intake or the quality of life, any other assessments that we need to get from the patient. It can be done through an app or through a tablet or even through a website. Another element can be wearables and digital devices. We literally are in the age where we get more and more use of smart watches or glucose monitors or patches, or maybe you've even had clinical studies with a mobile ECG. All of these are devices that 5 years ago or 10 years ago were even unthinkable to use in clinical trials. And now for the convenience of the patients, we can do this and we can do these assessments at home. Another aspect could be telemedicine visit, and we do those video calls from between the investigator and the patient remotely. We can have home health visits or mobile nursing. There's a lot of associations of groups of study nurses that can visit the patients at home to perform study-specific procedures. And another element that maybe you have been involved in a clinical trial is direct-to-patient drug shipments, which I briefly mentioned in the introduction. This is us being able to ship that IP, so the investigational drug, directly to patients' home. And of course, when it comes to the compliance and to tracking, which worries us, all of these are taken into account. So that's a little bit the setup that I wanted to give you when it comes to DCTs and how DCTs, are shifting and are changing the role of the CRA, because in order for us to be able to monitor what happens in our DCT studies, we need to, first of all, we need to rely on this technology. We need to know how to use it. We need to know how to manage it, how to deal with it. Would you say, Maria del Mar, I'm really curious about your experience as a senior CRA, as an experienced CRA. Would you say that now CRAs need to rely, to depend a lot more on technology than before? What's your experience?
Yes, I will say yes. In my experience, yes. Monitoring today means using way more systems than before. In some of my studies, I have to check like 5 or 6 different systems just to start reviewing the data. You have the EDC, IRT, lab portal, ePros, imaging, and so on and so on. But yes, the technology helps. I think it's a good change, but it's not always efficient because every system is different and you have to learn how to use it and you have to switch between them. And it can be at the beginning even more complicated to adapt to this new way of work. And not just for CRAs, I think for sites too. They are under a lot of pressure too, because every time we add a new platform, they have to learn how to use it. Most of the time they do not have the resources all the time. And we CRAs act like tech support and help them. So it puts a lot of pressure, I think, in both in us from the industry and for the sites too.
Totally. I can definitely see that. And I can also see how, for me, when I started being a CRA, I didn't have back then, which was almost a decade ago, I didn't have that much technology at that point. I was just being introduced to maybe one EPRO, so one tablet where we could give it to the patients, could respond to the questionnaire from home, and maybe that was it. And of course, the EDC system where we would collect all of the data. But I wonder if now, as being now a CRA, and I wonder if, Charlotte, now that you are a senior CRA based in the UK, do you share Maria del Mar's experience? Do you also struggle with that burden of technology? Or would you say that now we're just way more used to technology and it's easier for us because even on a personal life, we use way more technology? What's your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of both. So we're definitely using a lot more technology for study purposes, but also, in our day-to-day lives. So all of us are very familiar with using technology for numerous things like ordering your shopping, but using it for sites as well, I agree that we do have a lot more, and we have a lot more systems that aren't very efficient, aren't very good at actually what they're meant to do, which is meant to streamline data collection or make the lives of the site staff easier. So it is difficult because we have so much technology that we can use, but from my experience, very little of it is very good. A hard balance. So we do need to become, as CRA site support staff, we do need to become a lot more tech savvy in different technology systems that are quite hard to navigate and quite hard to train in and get our heads around for ourselves to then be able to provide that support that's needed.
Yep. Yeah. You're so right. I can absolutely relate to that. And I can see, I'm not a CRA anymore, but I can see within the community how most of us, the need that we have is to learn and to get familiarized with all this technology that then we have to support our sites with. And we have to train our sites, and we have to train our study coordinators how to train the patients. And then we are the original or the first element into that chain, where we need to make sure that the training and the knowledge that we transmit is clear, it's concise, and it's accurate, isn't it? Kitti, I was looking forward to get to this section of this first topic, because you were, as you said in your introduction, you were a site management associate, so a CRA managing observational clinical studies. And now you are at a tech vendor as an assistant clinical project manager. And I would love to know, what is your perspective now that you've seen these two sides, being a CRA managing clinical trials with technology, using technology, and now you're on the other side, providing or bringing in your experience and your knowledge to these systems, to this technology. What is the skills that you need? What is what's the experience that you need? Or tell us about this role.
Yes. So basically, when I was a site management associate, I managed observational studies. So I was the key first point contact for the site study coordinators, investigators. So I really faced the challenge that we have to use EDC, ECRF, imaging portals, many analytics platforms, and you have to check everything remotely. You have to manage all the communications remotely and build trust remotely, which is a very hard thing. So I saw the opportunity that from site monitors, you basically going to change like a data-driven risk manager, or I can say that, because we have to do more analytics and oversight of the study because we are doing less travel. So I think I used this skill set from mine, and I utilized as the assistant clinical project manager that we are doing globally data analysis on how these are going and how these systems are working or not working, because of course we are facing with issues as well. And I see that so many queries are opening for patient visit. It's not on the date because there were some issues on the site. There were some issues that the CRA or the site staff couldn't enter the data correctly. And I think as a CRA, you have to be prepared to help out remotely and on the site, of course. So you have to be familiar with this kind of systems as well. So yes, definitely this role are changing, and we have to utilize these kind of skill set that you have to adapt and really thinking on your feet.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you brought in that mention of the skills and how the CRA role is changing, because this goes linked directly with the second topic that we wanted to discuss in this panel, which is how is the CRA role progressing, or what do we see changing within the role itself? But before we go into the next section, we have a very good question that I think I would love to take the time to respond to it. And Catherine here says that there is a learning curve with study subjects, with the study participants, especially with EPROs. And this can be very challenging with some patient populations. What are your thoughts? Charlotte, or Kitti, of course, please go ahead. What are your thoughts?
I think, as I experienced, that these kind of vendors already providing trainings to CRAs how to help the subject and participants to enter the data, to use the system, and they are training them to how to solve the issues. I think it would be a very straightforward path because it's technology. Always there's issues and you have to solve it. And they are providing this training to site staff as well, so they can help the patients and subject as well.
Charlotte, do you have any experience with EPROs and patients' experience with EPROs?
Yeah, there's definitely patient populations where they will struggle using EPRs, especially if they're not used to it, the older populations. So it is tricky if you really want to use those kind of technologies with that patient population. I think it is still worth deciding at that time when you're designing the protocol, is this is the new technology and it does make things easier for, say, the site staff or the sponsor, but is it most beneficial to get good data from patients? Is it going to cause data entry errors, or is it going to cause a lack of data entry because they're struggling to use it? So even though we are moving more towards using these electronic systems, I think it's still a good discussion to decide whether that's appropriate or not for your patient population.
And that takes us straight into the clinical trial design. When we design that clinical study, and of course, when we get it reviewed by all the parties that review a protocol design, we need to always consider what is the target patient population. And sometimes it might be easy to forget what are some of the characteristics of that patient population. As Charlotte mentioned, it's very easy and direct for us to think of the elderly population or maybe of the more vulnerable population, but sometimes it's also a matter of geographical region. Some geographies are not exposed to this type of technology at all, and we might not even consider it because maybe us in our day-to-day basis, we already have that technology, or simply because the use of technology is absolutely different. And it all boils down to earlier stage when we design that clinical study. And you know what? Sometimes, or I would say most of the time, the CRA's perspective is never asked when we are designing these clinical trial protocols, and we're brought in only when we need to get the study going. But perhaps having the experience, having the perspective of a CRA, Maria del Mar, who has the experience of being a study coordinator and has been doing these questionnaires directly with the patients, probably when they were coming to patient visit at the site, isn't that knowledge, that insight very valuable? Now, because I'm aware of the time, I really want to move into the section, into topic 2, and I would love for us to have a bit of a discussion on how do we see the CRA role changing? Do you see any change? And I would love to give you my perspective first, because I know that we've been discussing, and every single one here, we have a different, not a different perspective, but a different way into which the CRA role is progressing. And I think they're all amazing and they're all really valuable. And all of us here, if you are a CRA and you might want to think ahead, where is your next step, or maybe what's your next step in your career, all of these 3 versions or could be an opportunity. So the way I am seeing the last, let's say, 5 years, the CRA role progressing is I see a lot more specialization. So I see how we have now activation CRAs, we have study startup CRAs, and we literally call them that, right? Study startup CRAs or activation CRAs. We have study closure CRAs, we have regulatory CRAs, we have site engagement. We have so much specialization now that before the CRA did everything from A to Z, from study startup, or even before, from hopefully bringing in a bit of perspective into trial design, to the closure and to the trial report and to the follow-up if there's any. Before, the CRA did everything, but now it's way more specialized. So I would love to know, Maria del Mar, from your experience, now that you've been study coordinator, you've been a CRA now, senior CRA, I would love to see, how do you see it?
I completely agree. Yes, I see growing fragmentation in CRA responsibilities, because again, it always depends on if you work for a big company or a small company. The bigger the company, the bigger the fragmentation, because you have so many more roles. But yeah, you have someone involved in recruitment, in patient engagement, in monitoring, central monitoring. So you have a more narrow view of the study, of the patients, and it always has good things and bad things. You have, before, when you had to do everything, sometimes it's a lot and one person can assume all that responsibility, but you lose perspective, I think, and there's always losses, and I think that's one of them. I think the sites also feel that fragmentation, because now they get contacted by 5 different people asking 5 different things, and they still have the CRA, that's the big contact and person to ask doubts. Now they have all these other roles that they don't know what they do. And yes, I think it's always pros and cons.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I remember when we were discussing this topic, we said a sentence that I literally put it down, and I wanted to bring it back today because I think it's so good. We said a lot about there's way more complexity now when it comes to the CRA role within the operations or within the conduct of a clinical study. Before, it was my CRA is everything. I go to my CRA for anything, from the troubleshooting a device to deciding on an SAE and what to do with the patient. And of course, then CRA would go to the medical monitor and with the sponsor, and it would be all about the CRA. But now the complexity is up. We have way more complexity, and sometimes the cohesion is down. And I love this word game a little bit that we did when we were preparing, because it's absolutely right how when we have different parties involved and more parties, because we're more and more specialized and fragmenting a little bit all the tasks that the CRA does, it's way more complex to keep them on track and keep them under control. And I would love to now, if we follow the same thought of, okay, now we have way more specialization, we have more fragmentation of the CRA role, what do we think now it's about the career paths when it comes to a CRA? Before, it was very unidimensional. Let's say you start as a clinical trial assistant, you are then a CRA, you're an experienced CRA, senior CRA, study manager, clinical operations director maybe, and whatever else. It was very on one path. But what about now?
I see the CRA role blending with the project manager role, becoming more of a hybrid, as if more of the study procedures become more and more remote. The CRA's got less time traveling, more time in the office to dedicate to other tasks. And also with DCTs, they've got that better sort of God's eye view of the whole study. But in terms of progression, it's interesting to see how that will change, because before it was CTA, CRA, project manager. So it might become, it could become more difficult. You're not sure, because if you've got more specialization, then you don't have as much experience gained in 1 year as you would do doing everything. But also the different careers that are now open to CRAs or CTAs, PMs is so much wider. You've got so many more different options. You can go more down the technology route, like you have, Maria. You become work for the vendor. You could just do activation. You could just do closeout. So it does open up a lot. So I think it'll be a benefit rather than we see a restriction of growth.
Kitti, what do you think? I'm curious because you came down this path as well as I did, from a CRA going more into I went towards a subject matter expert, that was called an SME, the role at a tech company as well. So your role is also different, but is into, let's say, from a CRA to the tech perspective. How do you see the progression or the emerging CRA paths?
I can really relate what Charlotte said, because as I see, we have so many cross-functional collaboration. It gets deeper, because as a CRA, you have to be involved in every part, because we are doing more because of the risk-based monitoring and decentralized trials. So I think way before we had these exact career path, as we talked about, that CRA, senior CRA, and that's all. But nowadays, if you are aware which of the skill set is your strengths, you can build up and you can focus on that, and you can see that, okay, I can be a project manager, okay, I can go to quality assurance, or I can be a people leader, for example, if you are so much caring and you have a very good talent to collaborate. So there is so much opportunity that we haven't thought about yet. So I think it's a very changing field now, and we have so much opportunity there.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely relate to what you said. And I can tell you a little bit from, we have our CRA Connect community and we're hundreds. I think at this point we're almost 800 members around the world. And I can tell you a little bit some roles that I've observed that CRAs develop into. And I just handpicked a few roles that maybe you don't or you haven't heard yet, but I wanted to bring them to your awareness because you might be interested into something like this, or you might just want to know that they exist, so that down the road, when you want to take a next step, you might be interested to look into these roles. So I definitely see how CRAs are going more into two directions as a career progression, of course. One of them is more towards being a site relationship person, more of what Kitti was saying, a bit of people management or people relationships, or site coordinator or site engagement, keeping that engagement with our sites or with our sponsors or with our vendors. The second route that I see many CRAs going is more towards, exactly as Kitti and I, more on the technology side. Because with more DCTs, more technology, more decentralized and more remote system, well, we will need experienced people who can manage these systems. So for example, have you heard about DCT project manager or site technology enablement or digital trial operations or clinical technology liaison? I literally just handpicked 4 roles. And maybe in your region, instead of being called DCT project managers, DCT study manager or DCT study assistant, or we always have some shifts, tweaks into how the roles are called depending on the region and on the company. But all of these roles are emerging because of technology and because of decentralized clinical trials. And what we also see is that it's not a hypothetical future anymore. It's not about yes, technology will shift the industry or will shift the CRA role. It's here now. And we see, even here on this panel, 2 former CRAs have already switched, so let's say, to one of the options or one of the paths, which is technology, and 2 other CRAs are in the path of clinical operations. So you now have choices. And I think that's absolutely amazing. The fact that DCTs and the clinical trials industry in which we are today gives us so much more options. And to wrap up, now that we've identified and we recognize that there's change in the industry, and this change driven by technology and by innovation is changing the CRA role, I want to ask the question, how do you prepare? How do you navigate this change? And we know that this change now is going to be continuous. It's not going to be a moment in which, okay, now it's over. Now we're on the other side. Now it's changed. Now we've adjusted to technology. No, it's going to be step by step, a continuous change and progression. So how can you, as CRAs, be up to date and stay up to date with that? And I've put together, just to wrap up, one slide with my top tips of what I also tell the community of CRAs to CRA Connect. And while I bring it up on the screen, how can a CRA navigate this continuous change? And the first tip that I have for any CRA here on the call is get comfortable with the new technology. You need to learn how all of this technology that we mentioned, e-consent, ePRO, wearables, whatever technology you have in your study, and the technology you don't have. Because in the future, maybe tomorrow, you get to be assigned on a clinical study that brings down all that technology, and you won't know how to navigate these systems, how to speak confidently about these tools, how to train confidently your sites about this tool. So get comfortable, get exposed with it. Then improve remote communication skills. And what I mean by that is improve the way you communicate with your sites, with your vendors, with your sponsors, over email, over a video call, over a monitoring follow-up, and as you're writing your notes. But especially back to it, it makes me smile a little bit, because the last time we talked about these in the community, I remember telling the CRAs that when you have a call, and if you have a Zoom call, don't be afraid to put your camera on. And it might be very silly, and I know that in our industry, we don't do that on a standard basis, but putting your camera on transmits the message way better. You can engage with that person. You can establish a relationship. You can even create a bond with that person. And that makes communication so much easier. Another tip, and how can a CRA navigate this continuous change and be prepared for it, is strengthen your risk-based monitoring. We need to stop just thinking about that checkbox or that check mark that we put in the EDC system so that the field looks green. That's not enough anymore. We need to take a step back. Like Charlotte, when she was mentioning, have a bit of an oversight of this type of God's eye type of perspective. We need to move beyond the SDV, so the monitoring, and we need to start spotting patterns, and we need to see behaviors. We need to be a bit more oversight perspective. Next tip that I have for you is to expose yourself to DCTs. It might be that you are a CTA, a study startup, or studies or CRA in a study that does not have any DCT features. Tell your manager that maybe you want to support some studies that have DCT features, or maybe there's some projects, or maybe there's some initiatives that involve bringing in, assessing new vendors to bring in that technology into the company. Offer support so that you can expose yourself to this technology. And the last tip I have for you is you need to stay connected and to keep learning. As you see, we're in full transition period, and I would say continuous transition period. But to be able to be a confident CRA and to also know where the industry is progressing, how's the CRA role progressing, you need to stay connected and to keep learning. How do you stay connected? First step you took is joining this panel. It's a discussion among CRAs, and we're discussing how we see the role, our role changing. You can, of course, take webinars, stay up to date on LinkedIn, follow those speakers in LinkedIn that speak about the topic, join a community. And I'm not even saying join CRA Connect. Of course, you can definitely join the community for CRAs that we have, but you can join any community or any group or any association, anything that will keep you up to date with the industry, with the role, and with the updates. As for example, we have the ICH GCP E6R3 now live, starting in this month. So we've been talking about E6R3 months ago, half a year, more than half a year ago. So knowing that this was coming, you can prepare for it, you can be informed, you can have awareness. And that's the secret when you navigate change, is to be informed and to know what you are up against. So we have a question. Do you recommend a PM, so a project management certification as a CRA? Charlotte, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would definitely recommend doing something like that as a CRA, even if you don't plan on becoming a project manager, but getting that understanding of the role, learning new skills. It goes back to you saying, how can you keep progressing as a CRA, keep up to date and stay relevant? Is the more transferable skills you have, the more beneficial it is. Yeah, I would recommend doing anything like project management related, try your hand in QA, just dabble in different areas and get a better understanding of those roles, and that will make you a better CRA.
Absolutely. And it's very much up to your interest as well. If you want to be more project management or project coordination type of role, then definitely thoughtfully decide what you want to train yourself for. But if you want to be more, I don't know, technology or more people or more site engagement or patient advocacy, then you can always choose whatever certification or training you want based on what your aspirations are, I would say. And it's not so much about having the certificate. It's more about what the knowledge you gain through going through that certification. That's the important thing. We have one last question that I will bring here on the screen, and it's a bit of a longer one. Thank you for that question, Miroslav. So for me, Miroslav is saying, site visit reports were always the most time consuming and often misunderstood of the CRA role. We constantly had to come up with 100 different ways to say the same thing. Copy and paste was the big no. ChatGPT feels like a natural solution. So how is AI changing the CRA role? I love this question. So what's your thinking here on the panel?
I agree about the reports, one of the repetitive tasks, but I don't see right now that AI is changing the role. I don't think many sponsors or CROs are implementing it. I think we are in a sort of test field, time. So I think it will, not just a role or an industry, but not right now. I don't think right now. It's early still.
It's a very interesting topic because I agree that the perspective of if it's early, I agree with that, but not in terms of it's early to adopt it. There's a reluctance still in the industry to adopt these type of tools, isn't it? And I understand because our industry usually is a lot more compliant or requires to be a lot more compliant. So there's a reticence to adopt technology until it's been tested a million times, or we have no other option than adopting this technology because now every industry out there.
That's what will come, that there's no option and we'll have to adopt it.
Exactly. So I have a suspicion that, and I hope I am right, my suspicion is that the system that we use to collect data, so the EDC or the CTMS, where we put our reports or wherever we have this connection between what we monitor and the reports that we make and where we store them, at one point we will have a sort of connection between the two systems, I hope, and that these systems will automatically be able to take or to pull in the information of what we did on that monitoring visit and just have it already available to you for maybe doing a review or a check that it's not missing anything or that it's not saying something that is completely out of context, and you just review it, submit it, and hopefully that will be our work when it comes to monitoring visit reports. But I do think that the way we've been writing our reports until now, which was offline in a PDF, box by box, completely rigid and very repetitive, I think those days are over, almost over. And the way we will report will be absolutely different. So I want to thank everyone for attending our conversation here on LinkedIn. If you find it insightful and if you want us to host more of these so that we discuss topics that are relevant to the CRA role, just tell us in the comment section, tell us in the chat, just give us a thumbs up or just tell us your impression, because our thinking is to maybe host these sessions more frequently so that we can bring in discussions of what we're discussing, learning, and what we are commenting within the CRA Connect community, also here to the broader audience. And I want to really thank you to everyone who attended. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to Kitti, to Charlotte, to Maria del Mar. I'm so glad that you could join me on this panel. And for everyone who wants to be in more conversations or to check more resources or to simply join a community of CRAs, an international community where we're learning, we're progressing, we're discussing, we're hosting webinars, we're learning from industry experts. We have a mentorship program from which both Maria del Mar and Charlotte are mentors within the community, and we launch a cycle every single 3 months. You're more than welcome to join us. And I've put here on the screen our website, and you can get more information there. So thank you, everyone. I know that there's some questions we couldn't manage within the time frame. I will take the questions and I will make sure that offline we respond to them. And thank you to everyone for being here today. Okay, bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.